Roll tape. Cut.
Tape
One.
rolling.
Action.
Loud.
When you were in the Japanese, when were you in the Japanese concentration camp?
I began to enter the Japanese concentration camp September 4, 1942. And I stayed there for 3 years because August 31, 1945, I was released.
Did you have any close friends in there with you?
I had no close friends with me because they came from everywhere, from inside and from outside the city, so no particular close friend, maybe one or two that I remember, but most of them were not with me.
How old were you?
I was 1942, I was just about 16 years old, going to 17.
Were you separated from your parents?
Oh yes, I was the first one who went into the concentration camp. My parents came in later.
Why were you taken to the concentration camp?
Because from what I remember, from what they told us, before this happened, a young cadet officer ambushed a group of Japanese and killed them all. And since this young cadet officer was a white man, so they put all the white people inside the concentration camp as much as possible.
Where was the concentration camp?
My concentration camp was in Bandung, which was used to be a Roman Catholic girls' school. And that was just surrounded with big bamboo fence, high fence. You couldn't see inside, neither could you see outside. And that was in Bandung. But there are many other camps that were located in Bandung South. There was a large women camp quite a distance away, where later on my mother, my sister, and two of my brothers were located. And then after a while, the older brother, what is now Uncle Jelle, was removed from them because he became too old, and he went into another camp which was in another place.
What country was that in?
That was, at that time it was still Netherlands, East Indies. Today it is called Indonesia.
What were the conditions inside the concentration camp?
Conditions, there were terrible conditions. First of all, the food was terrible. In the beginning maybe it was a little bit better, but then later on the amount of food was terrible. That was that one. When we can speak later on about the food a little bit better. Then the other part is you couldn't go out. If you would go out on a certain spot, you may have been shot by the guards. And bathrooms, there was I think one bathroom with 4 rooms for taking a shower and 4 toilets on the bottom floor, and the top floor was also about the same for a group of, how many? At least 10,000 inmates.
So what exactly was the food like? Like what type of food did you eat?
In the morning you got only just a little piece of sticky rice with some tea, and that was all. At dinner time, that was at the beginning. Dinner time, you got some little rice with some rotten vegetables, hardly any meat. Maybe meat once in a year. And when you have a piece of meat, then you are lucky because you saw it floating, and the size was about maybe 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. In the evening, about the same kind of food that you got. Later on, it was even worse. In the later years, in the morning, you get starch to eat. Just the plain starch that you make your clothes, you can starch your clothes with. And a piece of bread that was about 2 fingers thick, and about that size, not more. And in the evening, also rice with rotten carrots. That's the reason why I don't like carrots to eat raw. I have eaten carrots for 3 years, morning, evening, and with all different kinds of names. At one time it was called orange soup, then it was soup with tomatoes, and then it was tomato soup, and they have all kinds of different things, but the most of it was carrots, and still today I don't like fresh carrots. That was and the rice was measured. They were able to get the rice and get a certain amount, and it was not for more than a handful, and you got your turn to clean up the box for the leftover grains of rice. You did not clean your plate because you cleaned the plate with your saliva. It means to say you licked it all off, only to get everything in your body. Then some industrious people caught some snails, garden snails. They call them the acatina snails, and they cooked them. They sold them, and people ate them. No cat or dog would dare to come into the camp. Or let me say, if they would come in, they wouldn't come out alive, because we would catch them and we cook them. I have tried only once to eat that meat. The cat's meat is sweet. The dog meat is kind of rough. And that's the only two, and so it was only once that I tried to eat them, and since that time I've never eaten it anymore. Then, when we were cleaning out spot, there were many rats or mice under the grass, and many of them were running after the mice and killed them and cooked them. So anything that you could eat, you eat, whatever it may be. Vegetables that I normally have never seen in the market, but were growing wild somewhere here and there, people would just gather and eat them. And you don't care anymore what you ate, because when you are hungry, and we were hungry 3 years, can you imagine this, what it means? You eat everything.
What were your sleeping quarters like?
Sleeping quarters was worse than the floor. You have a floor and you have a bed, and if you don't know the bed, a mattress, and you don't have a mattress because the mattress you brought in by yourself when you were entering the camp. But when that mattress was gone, then you had only just the bare floor. And you slept close to each other because the space was not enough.
What were the bathrooms like?
Stinking bathrooms. Because if you have there so many thousand people using a few bathrooms, you can imagine what it was. I had the opportunity to clean with a group of other boys, so that we would not be subjected to the roll call in the morning and greet the Japanese with the bending head, because we were permitted to clean the bathroom. And when the bathroom was clean, we took the shower, so we were always in a clean place. But otherwise, it was a horrible place.
Did you ever have enough food to satisfy yourself?
That's what I just told you a moment ago. Food was premium. We never had enough. Never. The only time that we had enough food, was when we began to smuggle, when we were working outside. Permitted to work outside under the guardians of the Japanese. Or Indonesian, let me say it that way.
What did you do all day?
Nothing. Just have 3 years vacation. You sit down around, some people were playing chess, some people were playing cards, some just lounge around and walk around in circles, some talk, some try to study. Well, whatever you want to do, you could do, as long as you remain within the camp. You want to go to sleep, you go to sleep.
Did people ever try to rebel against the camp?
No, because they had no guns.
Did you ever have any visitors?
visitors maybe once, I was exactly maybe once in the beginning was about once a month. My mother used to come bringing some clothes or whatever clothes we could get, and maybe some little tidbits to eat. And then it was completely closed off, no more. I think after a year there were no more visitors whatsoever.
How did the Japanese soldiers or men treat you?
Let me say this way, the internment camps were guarded by Indonesian soldiers with guns. But we later on discovered that those guns did not work, and there were no bullets in it. The Japanese were not guarding them. The Japanese were supervising them. Those Indonesians were just under the, what shall we say, under the protection or under the supervision of the Japanese. They called them heiho. And these heroes were just in uniform and stood their guard in many, many different places. So the treatment. We had one Japanese, he was really the beast. Because whenever he came, everybody would just move away and run away. For the simple reason that he would beat people up for nothing. It became so bad that one time the Japanese translator, a Jew who had lived in Japan for so long and who had moved into the Indonesian area, he told this man, he told this Japanese, I said, you can do whatever you want with me, but I'm telling you this. We have a God in heaven, and that God is looking at us. And one day God is going to punish the people who don't do the right thing. And you have beaten up the people here in this camp like anything. One day, God is going to punish you. You just watch. It was not very long after this that we heard he was transferred to a place called Morotai. Morotai is an island, or a place on an island in the Moluccas, where Australia, who are bombing that place daily. It was within the reach of the Australian bombers, and he was placed there near the airport. And when he heard that he was transferred to that place, we heard him crying with such a loud voice that everybody was wondering what was happening to him. And then he was transferred to that place. Not long after that we heard the news from the Japanese South that during a bombing raid, this man was killed. It was what we call the punishment from on high. So the treatment wasn't good at all. If you do not greet them, if they would pass by and you don't bend low enough, you would be beaten up. And any little infraction, anything that they didn't like, they beat you up. That is the situation.
Did you ever see people become crazy in a concentration camp?
I don't think I see a person getting crazy. I only know that there was one time a middle-aged man who put on nice clothes and tried to walk out of the door of the gate. Of course, they grabbed him, and then he disappeared. What happened to him, we never know.
Did you ever see them torture anybody?
Yes. The torture, let me explain this way. In the beginning, we were in one camp that was a former Roman Catholic girls' school. And then, after about a year and a half, we were transferred to a former Dutch army camp. And then, every day, there were a group of internees who were allowed to go out under the protection or under guard from the Japanese to do certain work, digging holes as for protection in case bombing would take place. Also little holes where they could defend themselves. Then we had big holes where they could hide the motor cars and the trucks and all kinds of other stuff. I happened to be working in a group that was working in the, what we call in the Dutch, the intendants, which is the logistic group for the Japanese, unloading bales and bales of things, bales of rice, bales of sugar, bales of starch, bales of salt, and all kinds of stuff that we had to stuff up in the warehouse that was used, the food to be used for the Japanese. Now, many times when we would be going there, we were what we call checked up. Our body was checked up in order to find out whether we had brought in things that were not correct, were not proper for them. We were considered to be the worst group, one worse in the eyes of the Japanese, because we were known as the smuggling group. For a simple reason is that we smuggled so many things out and we smuggled so many things in. I smuggled in many times 2 handfuls of sugar, and that would give me about, at that time, 10 rupees each, and I could buy some little things in the store. And but then there were some other persons who were caught, not from our group, and they would have to kneel, and while they were kneeling on gravel, number one. Then they put a bamboo pole at the back of their knees while they were kneeling, and then somehow they'll squat. Now, if after an hour or two we were removed, or you could go away, you could not walk for at least 3 or 4 days. Your feet was completely paralyzed for some time. I have seen other people being beaten up, and usually they don't beat them up, they did also, but normally 2 people would be standing side by front of each other, 2 inmates, one beat the other and the other would beat him. And if you don't beat hard enough, then you get a beating too. So you had to, they were beating each other. And that was many times the punishment.
How many people would you say that died weekly on your level, or your department?
I know that there was at least 1 coffin that would go out the camp every day, at least 1. It could be more, I don't know, but at that particular place where I was, there was only 1 that came out every day.
Describe some of your sad times in the camp.
I don't know whether I can describe a sad time. Everything was a sad time, because you were away from home, 16 years old, and came out when I was about 19. You missed home, you missed food, you had to watch your own prisoners because they could steal your things away. So you had to fight for your own. And one particular sad time was usually the end of the year, Christmas to New Year. Christmas not so much, but usually the change from old to new, because that was in the former Netherlands, East Indies, and I think it's still in Holland the same way. That was a very well, shall we say, special day for the people. Christmas was also a day, but not as much as it was for old and new. And that was perhaps the worst part.
What did you miss the most?
Miss the most is food and freedom.
Did you think you were going to get out of the concentration camp?
Yes, I knew that.
Alive?
Yeah.
When did you hear that you were going to be released from the concentration camp?
The last few months, we were working and constructing a railroad from 2 different places. One was from side A, and another group was working on side B, and they were going to meet. But somewhere in the middle, there was another group working also towards each other. So we were working there regularly in a team situation, and every morning, a whole bunch of them would be collected, and we had to go by train to the place where we were working. Now, one particular morning, as we were waiting, on the road to wait for our guardians, for the Japanese, one of the boys said, "I heard last night that through the grapevine or through the radio that we had a secret radio there that would bring the news." Of course, quite hidden. If you were discovered, the only punishment would be death. But that was hidden very well. And this young man told us, well, the Americans have discovered a split an atom. I said, what does it mean? Well, he said, I don't know what that means. I only know they split the atom. So we went over to our work, and the interesting part is that at that particular time the train was pulled by a locomotive that was from maybe from the year 1700, if there were a locomotive. It was a terrible little thing. And when we came to a hill, it couldn't go forward, so we were stuck in the middle. And he tried, and he tried, and he tried, I couldn't do it. Until a train from the back would come and would push and pull at the same time the train upward. When we came to the place to work, the Japanese supervisor told us, when you go home this afternoon, you have to bring everything with you. All the shovels, all the pieces of wood from the shovels, the handles, everything, the baskets, nothing is to be kept. Because tomorrow you will have a good long rest day. In the middle of the day, we suddenly saw that the Japanese, as well as the Indonesian soldiers that were guarding us, were putting up their helmets, which they had on the back of their bodies, but they didn't put it on the head. I saw them putting it up. And at the same time, we noticed that they took their bayonets and put the bayonets on the guns. They put it just right there. Then our leader of the group said that not to worry about anything. He said there was an airplane that was flying over, small airplane, but I could not recognize what country it was. And if something happens, they said, watch, and it pointed to us to look. And we saw there a little certain spot, but on different sections, we saw their machine guns directed to us, which means to say as if something happened, if really the Americans or the Allies would come, they would shot us to pieces. But this leader said, don't worry, because as you notice at the back of these machine guns, there were several interknees with pieces of wood about that big, a bamboo. And they said the moment they would hear the click of that gun, just when they loaded it up, they would hit them and try to kill the guys. So they were prepared for it. But fortunately nothing happened. And right after maybe half an hour or an hour after that, the Japanese supervisor said, pick up all your things, go back to the railroad station. So we picked up all our things and went back to the railroad station. We didn't realize what was going on, but we knew there was something that was bothering them. At the railroad station, we had to go into the coaches, but there was no locomotive to bring us back. So we stayed there and waited until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Then in the afternoon, finally a locomotive came and pulled us out. When we were close to the city where we were living, it happened that we had removed slits of the windows in the train because the train was blinded. They could not open the windows. They had removed slits. Some of the young men had removed the slits so I could see outside. And the interesting part, as I looked outside at one spot, I saw a man that I knew. He was standing there at a house, and he put up this sign when he saw it. And you know who he was? It was my brother-in-law to be, her father. I saw her father standing there. He was free. A few houses farther, we saw 3 houses there side by side. The first house had a piece of red cloth at the back, the next one had a white cloth, and the third one a blue cloth. He said, something is wrong, or something is going on that we don't know of. Because red, white, and blue, that was our Dutch flag. And when we came to the camp, normally we would be, I'm going to call it now, examined whether we have brought certain things in. But this time we could just go in straight like that. And when we got into the camp, we saw people shaking hands. I said, what's going on? Don't you know? The war is over. Don't tell me. You people have been talking about war is over, war is over. No, that's really. Well, I didn't believe it. And several of us didn't believe it either. Then, at the night, as lights went out and they going to sleep, the block commander, or the leader of several rooms, came in and said, there will be no work tomorrow. You have free for some days, we don't know when you begin to work again, but your food will remain the same. But Mr. Say, we always got some little extra food because we are working outside. But another thing is that we were asked by our camp commander from the big, there was 13,000 men in that particular camp. He asked us to tell you folks, do not aggravate any Japanese or Indonesian soldiers. And we said, well, what's going on? We didn't know what it was. Maybe we are doubting. Do we have really freedom now or not? Well, a few days later, we were asked to, our group or our camp, our building, were asked to go into a particular spot under a tree. And there the commander or the leader of the block made the announcement. He read a statement from the Japanese commander that he said they were sorry that they had so many years in camp, but that now war was over and before long you could go home. I think there is no one who can imagine or can hear the sound that everyone was shouting. 13,000 people shouting at the same time tried to do that. And there was a kind of a shout that I don't think even today I can put copy. The shout that we were free. But at that time we also were asked, do not aggravate the Japanese. The Japanese were coming in, bringing in more food. No more food distribution, you can get as much food to the kitchen as you want. And we were told, be careful, because you have not been accustomed to eating so much food, it may cause you some diarrhea and so on. Before we could only get a small piece of meat once in a year perhaps, but now every day 3-4 carabaos would come in, or cars would come in for butchering, so we can get it, so we get some meat. Then also Red Cross parcels came in that were kept by the Japanese for months. Instead of distributing it, they kept it. And so we get some share, some little things from the Japanese, from the Red Cross packages, which was of course very nice to have, but many of us we didn't know what spam was, we didn't know what some of all these names were, because they came from America and we didn't know what that was all about, what these things are. Some of them, they talk about cereals. There was a package of cereal, grape nut cereal, I can still remember. And some of them, they say, what can we do with this? What shall we do? Well, some said, let's try and eat. And so we tried to eat. Yeah, it was palatable, but we were not sure whether it was supposed to be eaten or to be used for anything else. Then one afternoon, I was walking to another camp, not far away from the same, a camp within a camp. That was the boys' camp, where my youngest brother was interned. He was a special camp inside, and nobody could come in there, only in the afternoon from, I think, from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. the one who passed away a few years ago. I went over there, and as I went over there, I passed an army post or an army guard. And this was an Indonesian guard, it was not a Japanese. And there were 5 or 6 old people around, all with sticks in their hand. And I watched it to see what was going on. Then our own camp police came and told them to go away. Later on I heard that they were planning to kill the guard with a piece of stick, because now they were free and they wanted to kill them. So we could see the feelings that these people had. Well, then through certain ways we were able to come up to the 31st of August. And when the 31st of August came, those who were living in the city of Bandung were told to go to a certain place. Our names were called, we got a card stating that we were free. And then after a while, the camp commander said, "All right, folks, go home." The interesting part is that nobody moved. He had to call about 3, 4, 5 times in order to let us get out, because they were not sure whether I could go home or not. But finally we started moving, but before we moved, he said, "Listen folks, this is 31st of August. And the 31st of August was at that time the birthday from the former Queen Wilhelmina. And she was born she had her birthday on the 31st of August. And so the whole group that was supposed to go out sang the national anthem, and then we moved out. And when we moved out, in the beginning you saw it moving slowly, but then when they're coming to the final gate, oh, they were moving fast. Now how would you go? I had only one short pant and a shirt. My pants was studded full of holes. And as I walked out the camp, I wondered how I would go home. But we had already agreed upon, with my mother and all the others, that when we were freed, we would come to the home of where her father, where is she? He's sitting over there. Her father would be, and there we would meet together. And as I was walking out, carrying a little thing that I still had, I suddenly heard my name, him. And what in the world is that? I looked and I saw her father. He had heard that we were freed, and so he came over and he said, "Come, come, jump on my bicycle and we go home." So he brought me home. That was the first time that I saw freedom. So that was quite a thing to understand. It was the first one to be freed. Later on, the others were coming on.
Do you know what happened to your guards?
Do you have anyone?
To your guards, do you know what happened to them? Were they killed?
I have no documentation of this, but one of my co-camp friends said that after they were liberated, they were located in one place, he and several other ones, and at that time he had joined a police force, and he had in his possession, several of them had in his possession, some guns for becoming a police, young fellows. And one morning they were in a congregation, or they were talking in a particular street. Some of you don't know the street, but it's behind the hospital in Bandung. As they were there congregating, there was an Indonesian who were coming in selling oranges. And they were looking at him, and he had, of course, his Indonesian dress, and he had a hat on his head. But one of them said, "That must be Suharto." So all 4 or 5 of the boys stopped him. And they asked, he said, "What is your name?" They wouldn't want to give the name. And one of them, from the back, pulled off his head and he was bald-headed, indicating that he had been in the Japanese army. And he said, "You are Suharto. You have been in such and such camp. And you were the one who many times dealt us very badly. Put down your things." So I put down the things. They grabbed him, and they brought him not very far. There was a valley and some wooded area. They brought him there, tied him to a tree, and they put around him several hand grenades. And from the far distance, they did not shoot at him, but they shoot at the hand grenades. And of course, one of the hand grenades exploded, and that killed the man. That's the only time that I can remember that he killed him. Well, other stories were coming, but I don't know exactly anymore what these stories had, but they were able to do that. One of the worst Japanese that we had in the camp too, this man was suffering from a stomach ulcer, but he was unbearable. Not only towards us, but one evening he was in a particular camp guarding it, that his former Indonesian soldiers grabbed him, stabbed him with several knives, and dumped him into a well. He was killed right there inside. So they tried to revenge.
What were some of the things you wanted to do after you were released?
I don't know. No idea what, the whole thing was a mess. And we didn't know what we could do. There was no school. Food we had to find. And we didn't know what to do. There was no way of doing anything. Just roam around, hang around.
What lessons did you think you learned from being in the camp?
Several things. First of all, I never wanted to eat tomatoes. I never wanted to eat eggplants. I always had to have meat in my diet, otherwise I wouldn't eat. So that changed my whole outlook on food. Secondly, I was very precise in my clothing. What I mean by that is that the line there in your trousers had to be just right, and sometimes they were beside it, and my mother used to say, "Now do it yourself, iron your clothes yourself." But when we came out of the camp, it doesn't matter as long as you got clothes, and the clothes were, Japanese pants, or finally later on some blue jeans came in, which was the cheapest that you could get, and that was all what we had. Then the third part is I began to learn what human beings were, and not to trust everybody, and be careful for every human being that you meet. Know what you're meeting.
Do you think this experience helped your life?
Oh yes, I'm quite sure that it helped my life in many, many ways.
Now will you state your full name?
My full name is Leslie Keizer.
Got all the sound effects of the